Okay, so I'm going to take you through my first track of my recent album, Ouroboros, titled I Am. This is a slow evolving sort of dark ambient piece. The synth I used here is Abyss. I used this synth a lot in the album. It was one of the main things that I used. It was trying to learn this synth and also a little bit of granular synthesis in the making of this album. I'm not going to go really in depth on how to use this synth. I'm going to leave a link to live stream, I believe it was, from Venus Theory, who went over this synth really in depth. This is where I learned how to use it, and this synth was inspired. I created this after watching that video, so it was in direct response. So everything that I go over here, if you don't understand, if I go too fast, if I don't explain, if I don't understand it well enough myself, it's because I'm not Venus Theory, and he is the expert. So go check out his live stream if you're interested in purchasing this and giving this synth a use. But anyways, the idea here is that I really like the sound of sort of atmospheric, very heavily drenched in reverb, lots of distortions and imperfections type sounds. And this is an awesome synth for that. If you want something that's really slow evolving, but has interest to it and isn't going to be boring if you just hold down a note and play it and just hold down a note and let it ring, this is going to be the synth for you. So effectively the way this synth works is, and again, I'm not going to go super in detail, but there's all these really pretty looking sounds that are associated with all these different colors. So I can click anywhere and we're going to get a sound. There's a bajillion of them in here. Probably not actually a bajillion, but you get the idea. And if you find a sound you like, you can click the little dot here and drag it up to this bar here, which represents the actual sounds which are going to come together to create your synth. So if you notice right now, if I just play a note real quick, let that decay. Let me turn. It takes a while to decay. What you'll notice are these two different black lines moving back and forth, and this represents the sound that you're hearing. So instead of just having this be stuck static on one sound, which is what will happen in the beginning, you need to have a way to adjust your position here, which represents the moving back and forth, to get this sort of seamless sound of having one synth that really is built from multiple different sounds. In this case, I chose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sounds. So let me turn Abyss back on. So one of them sounds like this. 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 And the other sounds like this. So an interesting combination of sounds. So in order to get those to move naturally without having to drag this position knob back and forth, you can select your position, then head on over to one of your LFOs and drag this knob down here to the left or to the right, and this is going to create a sense of movement following up and down the sort of LFO as your sound moves back and forth left to right. Again, if that doesn't make sense, go watch Venus Theory's video. So in order to get this sound that I wanted, this really slow moving sound without it sounding too hectic, I dragged the rate way down, dragged up a little bit of smooth, and that allows this to move back and forth left to right. Another important thing is going to be this down here, the SNH, which I do not remember what it stands for. I believe H stands for hold. Don't quote me on that. Sample and hold, there it is in the name. Controls how much the sample and hold value influences position shift, click to highlight, and sliders impacted by this modifier. Who the heck knows what that means? But dragging a little bit left to right, I notice affected, it's sort of, what it sounds like to me it's doing is randomizing a little bit how long the hold is once it reaches the end here. So you'll notice if I click a note, these bars stick at the end for a little bit. I don't know if that's actually what it's doing, but it's affecting something to do with the sort of randomness of the sound. Again, don't quote me on that. I just liked the sound of turning it on as opposed to when it was off. And that is an acceptable reason to have something on when you are creating music. You like the sound when it's on and you have no idea what the heck it's actually doing, and someone asks you to explain it and you have no idea. But that is okay. Go watch Venus Theory's video. He actually knows what it does. Stereo spread. This one I think I do have an understanding of. So this is going to, normally these these bars would be right on top of each other. One represents the left, one represents the right. If you use headphones or have stereo monitors or anything and have been making music, you understand this concept pretty well. But by shifting this a little bit, it creates this gap between the two. So we've got one bar here and one bar here. So the right ear is doing something different than the left ear. Helps this, one, be more interesting, and two, when it shifts back and forth between the different sounds, helps it sound more seamless as if it's a natural transition and not an artificial one. So a really important thing. So that's the position knob is affecting these three things. The sort of LFO here, causing the movement, the shift and hold, and then the stereo spread here. That's the majority of the sound. The other thing that's going on is I've clearly got a little bit of pan. You can see this moving. So we're getting a slight moving back and forth between the left and right. And I don't even know what I used to make that happen. Maybe I used this LFO down here just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. So just a little bit more left and right panning. And then the cutoff here, I've got about halfway. You can see I've got a slow attack, this slow build, and then a long, long decay. Go watch Venus Theory's video. I've said that a billion times, but it'll help you understand this more. But we're starting with, you can imagine this is just like a cutoff filter. We're starting with it a little bit more than halfway. And when I hold down a note, you'll see that the cutoff expands to the right, basically allowing more high frequencies to come through. And then there's a long, long, long release. So after I let go of a note, it's helping the sound to really slowly, slowly, slowly decay. You notice this is growing, and then I let go of the note, and it's still playing. Okay, so I see that I've got two other things going on. FM, the amount of frequency modulation, I've got a little bit of that, which I believe is adding a little bit of distortion. Again, don't quote me. Tune, this is creating a little bit of detuning to just create more interest in the sound. That you can see there's just a tiny bit, and that is the basis of the sound. So the next important thing to look at is just the Midi here. We're working at 30 BPM, and this is the Midi. This is about 8.5 minutes worth of music. I wanted this to be slow and evolving, like I said. So we're starting down really low. We're starting at C0. If I hold that down, you can hear it's much quieter down here, but we get these cool sort of out of this world sounding sounds with this synth and playing it in a really low register. And then what I've done to just create interest throughout this piece and to create this sense of growth, which is sort of supposed to correlate with this sort of growing up and realizing sort of the expanse and nature of awareness and consciousness and what that represents and the sort of depth to it. It's something that I imagine is being very related to sort of like the depth and understanding the size of the universe. It's sort of that thing. So this sort of otherworldly sound combined with a lot of reverb gives us something which is, in my opinion, pretty interesting. So we start down at C0. We add our fifth. Then we add an octave. Then we add minor third, minor 7, add the 9, add a tritone for some wonkiness towards the end to make things really crazy, and then we get this final build on a big old C minor chord. So we're not even really moving back and forth between multiple chords. This isn't the kind of piece that's like doing some sort of like 1, 5, 6, 4 or some progression or something. We're basically just sticking around on C minor and letting all the different quirks and distortions and reverbs and natural evolutions of this synth do its thing. So I thought that this was an awesome way to start off an album with something that is so simple, yet which builds into this really massive thing. So if I play the note down here, let me just slowly add up all these notes, or I'm going to do it much more quickly, actually, not slowly. I'm going to do it much more quickly than the piece does itself. So things are going to get a little more blurred than they do in the actual piece, but I'm not going to make you sit here and listen to 8.5 minutes worth of Midi. So we start down on C0. We had a perfect fifth. We had an octave. the minor third, the minor 7, the 9, the tritone, and then back up again to the final middle C, the final octave. So I've played those all in rapid succession, so there's a lot of clashing notes going on right now, which isn't going to necessarily sound as pretty. Part of the reason this works so well is because we're functioning at a we're not functioning, we're just at a super slow BPM, and the piece is building over time much more slowly than what I just played. But you can imagine that if you've listened to the track, you know that this is a sort of gradual, slow build. These big gaps between these notes allows for a sort of much more natural decay, and then things rise. We get this real sort of wave of music, which is something that I was really trying to capture in this album, and is something that I like so much about slow evolving ambient music, is this feeling of the up and down of sort of wave of music. There's nothing wrong with sort of verse, pre-chorus, chorus type music, but I like something that feels a little bit more in tune with the sort of nature of being, the nature of the world. You see these sort of sine wave come into play in the nature of existence, in nature, in our emotional states of being. This sort of up and down wave is something that you just feel and see all over the place. So something I wanted to try and capture musically. So that's why I've got this just really, really, really slow build going on. Now, of course, this is building. I can't help myself, but from introducing lots of crescendos in my music, I love things that build and are building towards something. So the piece builds, but it builds entirely through Midi, not through the addition of more synths. You can see I started up here just fooling around with something on piano. Who even knows what the heck this is? I was like trying to create chords for an ambient piece. And you could imagine I was going to drag these all out onto some synth or something. But then I was like, nah, I don't like where that's going. So I got rid of that and I just opened up Abyss and ended up here. And then this is the bounced version. And then this is the same Midi. And I was trying to play around with creating a new synth, but didn't like it. So that's off. So this is literally just one Midi track, which turned into a 9-10 minute piece of music. So yeah, that's the Midi. The only other important thing going on here is just the effects. So I've got some delay. Here are the settings on that. And a super massive reverb, which is awesome for this kind of music. Valhalla Supermassive. And I believe that Supermassive is pretty cheap. If not, maybe I got this for free somehow, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. Repeater, I believe I got through the Slate Digital Bundle. I think it comes with that. But either way, Valhalla Supermassive is a fun reverb. Black Hole being another great reverb for ambient music. But when it comes to just the sheer massiveness, I have found that of these reverbs which I own, Supermassive is the best for that. So this is the preset I used. I maybe tweaked some things, maybe I didn't, couldn't tell you. And yeah, so now with the reverb on, let me play a note and we'll get an idea of what the delay and the reverb are doing. Beautiful. One of my absolute favorite things about making this genre of music is not even the finished product. It's the creating of this kind of sound, throwing some reverb on it, and then just holding down chords, closing my eyes, not having to know how to play piano, and just listening. So that's it for this piece. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments. I will see you all soon when I go over track number 2. Take care.